Greetings all, and welcome to Election 2024, What We Learned, hosted by myself, Steve Foulke of Ottawa University, and Dave Zook, who is joining us from Vetter, Germany, and
Hi.
is on the faculty at the University of Marburg. And we're here tonight to talk about the election from a couple of weeks ago. And so, greetings to all. I know that we have a wide variety of folks from across, frankly, across North America, including some folks that I have not seen or heard from for a long time. And so it's great to have you join us tonight. We, as always, thank Laura Boyd for her hard work behind the scenes, making this happen. And so it's 3 a.m. in Vetter, Germany.
Yes.
It's 9 p.m. in Mar-a-Lago. So greetings to President-elect Trump. It's 8 p.m. in Ottawa, Kansas, and Overland Park, Kansas, and also in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Schlemiel, Schlemazel, Hassenpfeffer Incorporated, to our good folks in Milwaukee, give our greetings to Laverne DeFazio and Shirley Feeney. And also then it's 7 p.m. in the Valley of the Sun. And so welcome all to a conversation about the election 2024. And so as we move through this, we will explore the presidential election. We'll explore a bit about what happened at the House and the Senate levels as well. And I just want to give you all a heads up that you may, in fact, see us again. It's hard. We should always be careful about predictions, but we'd like to then join you in a few months after Trump's 100 days in office to assess sort of where things are at, and that should be sometime in late April. So we look forward to that possibility. So we also, frankly, like to thank a faux sponsor, and that faux sponsor is civics education. An informed citizenry is at the heart of a dynamic democracy. Dave, would you like just to throw a word out for or in praise of civics and civics
Oh,
education?
civics education. Yeah, was a great concept. I'll miss it. Um, uh, uh, and I think Jefferson pegged it. Um,
Yeah.
I think we're seeing what a lack of civics education gets us, and it doesn't
Well,
take us in the direction of more democracy.
one wonders, yeah, one wonders if that in fact is not the case. And so, yeah, thank you for that. And so, I know I have a number of students, and greetings all. And I know that, well, you're here for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons you're here is for this. And so, this is the first of the five Easter eggs. The first of the Easter eggs is elected from Alice
Excellent.
Cooper. And
Yeah.
so, what you will find here over the next hour or so are a number of songs that have a kind of connection to voting. And if we're starting with Alice Cooper, you can only imagine where we finish. All right, so
Oh, there we
Dave and
go.
I were with you a month and a half ago. Oh boy, and we put some predictions into motion, and a handful of them, didn't turn out,
Yeah,
and
I
so
prefer that you actually use the first person singular talking about this.
I figured you would. And so, if this were baseball, I would have I'd be in the Hall of Fame. But in terms of predictions, it's problematic. And so I was wrong on two of the three. And so let's, as they say, go to the videotape and look at those predictions. And so again, month and a half ago, confidently believed that Kamala Harris would win the election, would win the electoral college vote, and also win the popular vote. And I thought that, in fact, this would set in motion some enormous changes in the Republican Party, a Republican Party that would be looking for direction in a kind of era where Donald Trump was no longer a seminal figure in the party. I think I was wrong about that, as I was with this prediction. Although, candidly, I mean, let's be fair, I barely missed this one. But the House, I predicted that a squeaker, that the Democrats would, in fact, take the House. That didn't happen. We'll talk more about that. The Republicans will hold the House, but only with a very slim majority, maybe 5 or 6 seats, which is even slimmer than it was before. But I mean, let's be fair. I missed. And
Well, okay.
hey, oh, wait a minute. Okay.
If if there had been a little bit more down ticket action, if there had been like even normal down ticket action, maybe this might have come about. There was an amazing amount of ticket splitting,
Yeah,
and we'll need to talk about that. But it was very strange and not really something anyone could anticipate, I think.
I think that's fair, Dave. I appreciate you saying it that way. But I do think that there were some odd things that happened that frankly enabled Republicans to grab hold of the House. Now we'll talk a little bit about this. You kind of careful what you wish for. Mike Johnson. Nobody wants to be Mike Johnson in 2025, the leader of the House. And then, but there was one, right? And so successfully predicted that in fact the Republicans would grab hold of the Senate. Boy, did they grab hold of the Senate! And so, as we'll talk about, they ran the table basically. And so they are in position to not only control the Senate in 2025, but maybe past that, given where they are. We'll talk more about that. Okay, so those of you who are still with this will note that it's time for the second Easter egg from the great Patti Smith. Late 1970s, people have the power. So those of you scoring at home, elected and people have the power. All right, so let's get into it a little bit, shall we? So as we talked about a month and a half ago, right, the polls were very close. They were close for really as soon as Kamala Harris entered the race, after maybe a couple of weeks she was in the race, she made up some ground, and the polls were kind of neck and neck. And I think it's fair to say that the insiders in the Trump campaign, the last week of the campaign, thought that the campaign had lost. And insiders in the Democrats, with the Harris campaign, thought that they were in really good shape. And part of the reason that Harris and her brain trust were so optimistic was their fundraising. This is unprecedented in American history. So in the roughly 4 months, she raised $1.5 billion. So no one has raised more money more quickly than Kamala Harris. She had significantly more money, roughly 200 to 300 million more than Trump. She is getting
and the ground game was just solid. You know, all the conventional wisdom. These are metrics that point to really good results.
Right.
And we failed to see those results materialize.
I think that's right. So there's a lot of money quarterbacking when it comes to the Harris campaign. And again, there's plenty of kind of griping about that she spent $1.5 billion, that she didn't distribute more of that down the line in terms of Senate and House candidates. But again, I would just counter with, what was she supposed to do? I mean, if she was supposed to spend it, right? And so there was some question about how she spent it. There's always going to be this. But every metric, as Davis suggested, right, really pointed to the fact that Harris was in really good shape. It's also the case that there's almost no complaints about her campaign, right? There were no moments of, oh no.
Essentially flawless.
Essentially flawless, right?
Yeah.
And this was, I think, was a real concern, because Harris had run campaigns before, including running for president, which were, quite frankly, blunderfests. That wasn't the case in 2024. Now, there is some, there's pushback in lots of areas. She did spend a fair amount of time courting Republican votes. Those of you on the call will recall Harris being on stage with a number of key Republican figures, most notably, though, Liz Cheney, a former senator from Wyoming, in an effort, again, to try to bring Republicans into the fold. Okay.
I would maintain that was not a mistake. Certainly not. In retrospect, you can wonder about the effectiveness of that. But at the time, it seemed like it was probably going to be necessary to reach across the aisle and win over some traditional Republican voters.
Yes, I think that's I think that was the strategy. I think it made a lot of sense to a lot of people. It maybe caused some dissension amongst the Democratic ranks, as Democratic turnout was quite soft, as we'll talk about. But again, just on the whole, hers was a very solid campaign. Um, However, in the cold light of day, um, she not only lost the Electoral College, and she not only lost the popular vote, but she, in some cases, were massively underperformed against Biden 4 years earlier. There's very few places in the United States where Harris gained more votes in 2024 than Biden did in 2020. Even in places where Biden won, even when places where Biden lost, he got more votes than she did. That's true. Well, that's true in Kansas. I mean, it's just true across the board. And so there is this, there's a lot of wondering. And so part of our task tonight is to explore some of these questions about what actually happened. And does this suggest that there are big changes afoot in American politics? Or does this suggest that, in fact, it was a kind of one-off and that the Harris campaign was an unusual one, and that Trump is an unusual figure? We'll explore a number of these things. And so let's refresh our memory of 2020. So you remember 2020, right? And so Donald Trump was president, Joseph Biden was the challenger, and well, there were swing states, right? There were states that were contested, states like Georgia and Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada. And Biden won them all. So in terms of swing states in 2020, Biden claimed the swing states. Now, oftentimes the results were incredibly close, particularly in the case of Pennsylvania, Arizona, and also maybe no place was closer than Georgia. But Biden prevailed. He also prevailed in the popular vote, which we'll talk about. That's 2020. So, Dave, before we look at 2024, can you just talk briefly about the sort of blue wall strategy that the Democrats wanted to put into play? I mean, the blue wall. What's the blue wall? How did it work for Biden? Maybe how did it fall short for Harris in 2024?
Well, the blue wall, traditionally, if you're a Democratic president, you want to get all of those states in the Northeast on your side. Particularly, I mean, some of them are gimmies, but you have the swing states like Wisconsin and Michigan. And those haven't even always been swing states. This is also, they used to also be solidly in the Democrat camp.
That's right.
And the recent changes in demographics have changed that. But if you're in the Harris campaign, you want to see her get Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin. You want to be able to count on those states, your blue wall, to get you over.
That's exactly it. That's well stated. And so a trigger warning for those who were supportive of Kamala Harris, because here we go. And so in 2024, the blue wall vanished. So states that were in play, supposedly: Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, all went the way of Trump. Right? All went the way of Trump. Now, there were, candidly, on election night, there were lots of surprises, but there were kind of no surprises at the same. I mean, it was one of the odd things is I think many people believed that the election would be, in fact, razor thin, and the results would not be known for days. In fact, we sort of joked when we put this program together 2 weeks out from the election, we were hoping that there would be something to talk about. As those of you who recall election night know, we knew, right? We knew. We knew. And so the surprise on some level was that there was no surprise. So it's It's an odd thing. It's an odd thing that Harris kind of went 0 for the swing states. But maybe there are ways of explaining it. And so we're going to get to those in just a second. But we're about a quarter after the top of the hour. And so I want to encourage people who have questions to put those questions into the chat. Laura, perhaps you can, at various points along the way, if there are in fact questions, we'll take them as we go along. We're also, of course, going to leave time for questions at the end. But again, if something kind of occurs to you as we move through this and you'd like, a little back and forth, we'd like to hear from you. So again, feel free to put questions into the chat. And so, here we go. And so as we recognize, the United States elects its president through the Electoral College, bizarrely, right? And so you need 270 electoral votes to become president of the United States. And the popular vote doesn't really matter. But yet, as we also know, the popular vote really does matter because it suggests something about the popularity of the candidates and also potentially a kind of mandate for an incoming president. And so as of, I think this is as of a few hours ago, this is the popular vote total. And it's, it's a significant victory for Trump. No one's getting around that. But as we can all see, it's also below 50%. It is, in terms of percentages, it's quite low. It is, in fact, the 44th smallest percentage or margin of victory in terms of kind of overall the mandate, if you will, 44th smallest in 51 elections since 1824. So it is, it's a victory. What we're seeing is that there's still lots of votes being counted. Amazingly, there are still 570,000 votes in California alone tonight, and many other votes in other places. And so what we're seeing is that the Trump's totals are, in terms of percentages, are continuing to drop. But one of the questions I think that we need to address, and we'll get to at a point here quite soon, is does in fact Donald Trump have a governing mandate? At 49%, 49.9%, is that in fact a mandate? And I think that's very much a kind of open question. Although, Dave, I think you would agree that Trump will see it as a mandate.
Well, when you consider how most people assessed his chances going in, the fact that he won it all says to me there is more support for the man and for his program out there in the general populace than most people thought, certainly more than you and I thought. Yeah. And so in that sense, when you break the odds, I think there's a certain mandate that goes along with that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. Now, so just a reminder, 2020, an election that again Biden won. Biden won with 51% of the vote, and also again a popular vote total of over 80 million, and certainly Donald Trump will not approach that. All right, we've got some questions in the chat. We're gonna get to those in a bit. This is one of the dangers of putting your slideshow together too soon. And so I started this slideshow a couple of days ago, and a couple of days ago, the 2024 turnout, the number of people who voted for president, was still less, actually quite a bit less than 2020. As of this evening, it's slightly more. But one of the interesting things about 2020 was that it was an election held in the midst of a pandemic. Perhaps some of us remember that. And with that, there were special voting measures put in place by a variety of states. Things like adding a number of kind of ballot boxes, drop-in ballot boxes, almost like on every street corner in some places. You can see here drive-through voting, enhanced voting by mail, and almost without exception, those special measures were taken off the board in 2020. In part, well, I mean, there are a variety of reasons for this, but the turnout in 2020 was massive. It does look like, though, 2024 will be maybe just slightly more. These are, again, this is kind of a blizzard of numbers, and I'm not trying to blow out your eyeballs here. But generally speaking, right, when we think about presidential elections, the number of people who vote gets bigger each election cycle, right? So in 1960, you had 68.8 million. The next cycle, 70. And there are, though, the exceptions where there is a kind of drop that's unusual, right? In general, in America, even though this is a country that's growing very slowly demographically, very slowly, as slow as it ever has, the United States is growing, and there are more eligible voters and more registered voters every presidential election cycle. It is the case, however, that the 2024 election will just barely surpass the 2020 election. So let's talk about some of the questions, some of the assumptions. And this is a big one. So we talked about this briefly a few weeks ago, but there was a belief that in the United States, where the Supreme Court had reversed itself on Roe v. Wade and put abortion as a question in the hands of the states, there was a belief that women were, across the political spectrum, were activated by this. And that given the opportunity, women, particularly suburban women, would vote for Harris. And they would vote for Harris in massive numbers. And perhaps some of you are familiar with this campaign to inform women about their privacy when it comes to voting. In fact, maybe there are women on the call who were, you were in a restroom where you saw these sticky notes in a stall. The idea that your vote is private and that your husband or your boyfriend, can't find out. This didn't happen. The massive wave of would-be Harris voters just didn't take place. It didn't. And this is true in all of the swing states. This is, I think, arguably the biggest surprise of the election, right? That in fact that women, independent and Republican women, suburban women, didn't vote for Harris. Well, they just didn't vote for Harris. Now, abortion was on the ballot in various measures, articulated in various ways in a number of states, as you can see here. It passed in 7, and it failed in 1 in Florida, even though it got 57% of the vote in Florida. In order to alter the state constitution, you have to get to a 60% requirement. That's so. In that case, I guess 60 is the new 50. But this was also believed that a great thing for Harris, that you had the abortion question on a number of states, and that this would in fact activate women voters to maybe even cross party lines and vote for Harris. This didn't happen.
Well,
right,
the other way to see that is that the pro-choice vote had another way of expressing itself directly with these referendums, and made it no longer necessary to get your pro-choice attitude out there by voting for Harris.
I think that's one explanation. I think it's quite a viable explanation. You had a number of interesting things happen in states. For example, in Missouri, it was a constitutional amendment was on the ballot to protect women's reproductive choices, and it passed in Missouri, but also then elected to another term in the U.S. Senate was Josh Hawley, who has made it sort of his life's mission to create a nationwide abortion ban. So there are sort of a number of things happening that are are difficult to explain from a distance. So here we go. So is in fact Kamala Harris an unpopular candidate? Um, I guess, I guess. And if that's the case, um, why? And so this is where we don't want to kind of drift too far into speculation and psychoanalysis and whatnot. We're going to try to work with data as much as we're able. But there is a kind of I think particularly still so close to the election, there's a kind of gut instinct that you have to also sort of acknowledge. Um, is it not the case that Harris was strongly linked to arguably the most unpopular president in the era of modern polling? So when you look at polling that goes back to basically the era of modern polling, basically dates back to the mid 20th century, World War II. On average, no American president has ever been more unpopular for longer than Joe Biden. Now, were there other presidents who dipped lower? Yeah, Richard Nixon when he resigned. Yeah, Harry Truman when he left office. But Joe Biden, as we can see here on the chart, has been in the tank for 3 years. He had a kind of momentary kind of moment of modest popularity in and around his election, and then it fell off the cliff and never recovered. And is it not the case that, in fact, on some level, she was closely connected to a remarkably unpopular president? Dave, you have a thought about this?
Well, I think that's clearly the case. I'm I'm not sure that this was the decisive factor, but it's like in 2016, all the obituaries that were done back then were looking for the key factors in the loss, and there were like a dozen.
Yeah.
And given how close it was, if any one of those factors had not been involved, things could have turned out very differently. So, in a sense, any one of a dozen factors were key because had they failed, had they not been in play, the result could have been a completely different one. So,
Yeah.
so yes, this was probably one of the factors that led to her loss.
Yeah, I think that's right. And so with that, then it's clear that Democratic support across the board was pretty soft for Harris, and it was alarmingly soft in very safe states, so highly Democratic states, if you will, places like New York State and California, most notably. But you also saw it in Virginia. Basically, every state that Harris won, her support was well, certainly below that of Biden. It's what is really striking when you look at the turnout numbers in Democratic strongholds like Philadelphia, Detroit, and even New York City, massively underperformed. Just people voted by staying home. And again, it's very difficult to know sort of what happened and why that happened, but
I think the conventional wisdom going into it was that there would be just like a record turnouts because on the one hand, the Democrats, anyone who votes Democrat has such a visceral hatred for Donald Trump that you would expect these people to crawl over broken glass to go out and vote against him, regardless of their feeling about their own candidate. A vote against Trump, and the same thing on the other side.
That's right. That's right.
Donald Trump has a loyal following. His whole MAGA following, and there's also a case that few Republicans detest him more than they detest the idea of voting for a Democrat.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think that's
So
right.
they're going to get out and make sure that he wins. So I was expecting a very, very high turnout, and the fact that this just barely beat 2020 really surprised me.
Yeah, the old WC Fields line is that I don't vote for, I always vote against. Maybe that didn't necessarily hold true here. So Laura, we were half hour or so in. Laura, do you have a couple of questions for us from the chat, please?
I do. We have a few. So the first one was, when did the US begin its swing to the right, and what were the factors that brought that about?
Well, so a number of answers to that. I think Dave and I would, and I'll let Dave speak to this, but I think it's the 1960s. I think it's the Southern strategy employed by Republicans, namely the Richard Nixon. The South was historically a Democratic stronghold. Nixon flipped that with white Democrats who were disaffected Democrats because of civil rights. And so it would be my take that it was really the 1960s where we began to see a real strong shift into a kind of right-leaning America. Dave, you have a thought about that?
I'm going with as long as we're taking the broad historical perspective, I'm going to go with the 80s, moral majority, the influx of evangelicals into the political, evangelicals becoming politically active. This is something that certainly
Yes.
before 1970 was actually not so much the case. Jerry Falwell came along and really, really activated the religious right, and
That's right.
that hasn't changed. They've been a solid block going forward from that point. But
No
I
question.
understood the question to be more about this recent swing to the right,
Okay.
and I'm not sure that that has actually happened.
Yeah, I'm not certain about that either.
One could see this result as a result of the swing to the right. And I'm not sure that Trump got elected because the country as a whole has become more conservative.
I wonder about that too. And again, we'll look at that in a minute. But is it a question that Trump is a kind of harbinger of things to come? Is he kind of the tip of the spear of a kind of political movement, or is Trump a kind of singular figure who is running against a candidate who was had a
Who
number
was
of
also
things?
singular in a number of ways.
That's right. That's right. Laura, do you have one more question we can take before we move into some other issues?
Sure, we've got a few of them in here, so I'll just grab one. In the days when trains were the dominant form of transportation, major political candidates visited Kansas regularly, engaged with prospective voters, even if they were on their way to somewhere else.
Right.
Today's candidates focus on a handful of states and counties, but the largest group of Kansas voters are still unaffiliated, even though Kansas is dismissed as a red state. Would more widespread in-person campaigning change the way Kansans vote?
I think it could, but if you're a candidate with limited time and limited resources, why would you ever come to a state with 6 electoral votes?
And
Now,
if you're Republican, you don't need to. You're going to get Kansas.
yeah,
And if you're Democrat, you would have to so intensively campaign to even stand a chance of flipping Kansas that you're leaving a lot of other states ignored. So yeah, during the times when you're riding through Kansas on a train anyway, and that's a very good point. Yeah, you'll have some train stops, but now in the days of electoral college, it's a science how you're going to get the swing states on your side. Kansas is a flyover state,
I
just
think that's right.
that
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah, but the notion, right, of coming into contact with a candidate, sort of changing your perspective on a number of things. I can still remember when I saw Richard Nixon in Abilene, Kansas, in the late 1960s at Eisenhower's funeral, and it made me feel differently about American politics. I don't think there's much question about that, even though I was a tiny little kid. let's look at a couple of other interesting data points from the election. This notion of ticket splitting. And so you're voting for, so you're a Democrat, for example, and you're in Wisconsin, and there's a hot Senate race, Tammy Baldwin against a very potent Republican challenger. And Baldwin has, as you can see, 1.67 million votes. However, what happened to Kamala Harris's Democratic support? She has, right, 1.66. This was, does it explain fully how Harris lost in Wisconsin? No. Is it alarming? If you're a Democrat, is it alarming? If you're Kamala Harris, does it kind of make you wonder? Okay, another ticket splitting example. The great state of Arizona, a really hot Senate race, Ruben Gallego against Kerry Lake. Gallego, this is the Kirsten Sinema seat. And Gallego trounced Kerry Lake. All right, where are those votes for Kamala Harris? There's a lot, if you will, of missing votes. So if you have 1.67 million, I mean, you would think you would get close to that with Harris, but you don't. And so it's clear in a place like Arizona, maybe a little less clear in Wisconsin, but it's certainly clear in Arizona that a number of voters saw the Senate race one way and saw the presidential race another way, which speaks to some of the things that were happening more broadly in the electorate. In this election, Latino men moved roughly 13 points in the direction of Republican candidates. And this is also true for Black men, although the percentage is probably closer to 5. That's not, that's another data point. But this ticket splitting thing is curious, and at the end, it's a kind of a head scratcher, I think, to many Democratic insiders. More questions than answers. But I think what is clear is that the tsunami of women voters that were going to come out for Harris simply didn't. So let's put this on the table, shall we? All right. A month and a half ago, Dave had fewer doubts, but I had a lot of doubts about Trump and his potency as a political force. I don't have those doubts anymore. I think it is clear that he is a potent force. I think it's clear that he is in position to become the most consequential president since FDR, and maybe then some. I think it's so I just want to put this to Dave. I know some of you have questions along these lines, but so Dave, is Donald Trump the tip of the spear of a political movement? Is he the kind of harbinger of things to come in the United States politically, or is he in fact a kind of singular figure?
Well, he's certainly a singular figure. For my way of thinking, he's the only Republican candidate for president who should have been disqualified for any number of reasons. Not a candidate like any other. There were a number of reasons that I think, and this is the thing that really blows my mind about these results, is that obviously the majority of Americans see him as a viable candidate. His refusal to concede and accept a peaceful transfer of power in the last election, his history of sexual assault on women, his conviction in criminal cases. These are things that growing up, I would have said, well, someone with that burden will never be elected president. And clearly, I was wrong about that. So many things that have been part of my conventional wisdom for the last 60 years have just dissolved, evaporated as a result of this election. So yes, he's singular. I don't know what this means going forward.
Yeah, and so I'm at a loss as well. Again, we'll get to more questions in a moment. Donald Trump becomes president of the United States on January 20th, 2025. Some things we should note about the presidency is that the president has the power to create executive orders. Executive orders are essentially legislating from the Oval Office, creating laws from whole cloth. You do not have to utilize Congress. And so some of the most famous executive orders in American history include Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. It also includes the funding for the Manhattan Project. When Dwight Eisenhower sent troops to Little Rock, Arkansas in 1957, that was by executive order. Maybe the most notorious executive order was Executive Order 9066, signed by Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1942, which ordered the mass incarceration of Americans of Japanese descent. Maybe we should put a star by that particular executive order. Donald Trump had 220 executive orders he signed in his first term. It is reported that there were hundreds ready for his signature when he's ready to take office. The record of executive orders is 3,721 by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Of course, he was in office 13 years. The executive order. The other thing we should know about a president is that the president has the power of the pardon. The final line is the important line in this regard here, and that the president has, again, power, almost essentially unlimited pardon power in federal cases. I think it's likely that Donald Trump will pardon himself, maybe even retroactively. He has that.
And just to be clear, the actual legal status of that type of pardon has not been clearly decided yet. Does he have the right to pardon himself?
Well, we'll find out.
We will find out. I think clearly with the way the Supreme Court has shaped up, he's not going to have a problem with that. They're going to come down on his side. But I find it very strange. I find it very strange that this is a possibility.
I suspect that that's right. I think we should also anticipate that Donald Trump will pardon those who are involved in the January 6th insurrection, as well as then commuting the sentences for those who are currently incarcerated for crimes related to January 6th. One other thing about Donald Trump's legal situation. Some of you recall this past spring that Donald Trump was convicted of 34 counts of felony counts of business fraud related to the Stormy Daniels fiasco. Today, prosecutors met with Judge Merchant to possibly delay, if not abandon, the sentencing because, in fact, Donald Trump will be president on the 20th of January. That was later. That was this afternoon. The Supreme Court is a body that is selected by the president. It is approved by the Senate. On the Supreme Court, you have two members, Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, who are in their 70s. Both have suggested that they may, in fact, step down. The guy in the middle, seated in the front row in the middle, is John Roberts. He has served the Supreme Court 19 years. It is reported that he is ready to go to greener pastures. It seems possible, if not likely, that Donald Trump will have three openings, perhaps in his first year as a president. And the woman on the left, seated on the left, is Sonia Sotomayor, who has served on the court for 15 years, is quite ill with diabetes, and her health is very very tenuous. And one more thing to note: we mentioned this the other day when we were with you a month and a half ago. The Supreme Court this past year essentially created a kind of well, we don't know. a kind of, we don't know. It is a situation where a president, in fact, has almost unlimited immunity for so-called official acts. The question asked to the Supreme Court, what's an official act? And the Supreme Court has essentially answered just about everything. And so we're moving into a time that will be, I think, at best unsettled. So maybe it's a good time for an Easter egg. And so the third Easter egg is from the great protest thinner Phil Oakes, Days of Decision. My guess is that a number of people on this call won't know who Phil Oakes is. If you've heard of Bob Dylan, he's a contemporary of Bob Dylan, and Phil Oakes was tremendous performer. Days of Decision is an excellent song. Let's go to the Senate, shall we? The Senate. There are 100 senators, so every 2 years, roughly a third of all senators are up for re-election. And so the Senate races, as we talked about a month and a half ago, the Democrats narrowly controlled the Senate, and the Republicans needed to kind of run the table in order to grab hold of the Senate, and by gosh, they did. And so whether it was Shealy in Montana or Cruz in Texas or Moreno in Ohio or Justice in West Virginia, Republicans won. When all is said and done, Republicans will have a majority of 53. There is still one race that is yet to be officially called in Pennsylvania. Republican Dave McCormick is ahead of Bob Casey, but it has gone to the automatic recount. And so in January, when there's a new Congress seated, the Republicans will control it, and it will be run by this guy, John Thune. He will be the majority leader of the Senate. Civics education, ladies and gentlemen. The Senate majority leader is probably the second most important and influential position in Washington, only behind the president. And
Mitch McConnell certainly showed what that can look like.
That's right. Yeah. So Mitch McConnell, the aforementioned Mitch McConnell, was the Senate majority leader for a number of years, arguably the most consequential majority leader in American history. And so John Thune is not Mitch McConnell, but he'll lead Congress. And the question with John Thune is simply this. We're going to cut to it right this. So the Senate's job is to approve the president's appointments. They have an oversight of the executive branch in this regard. And so when the president appoints a Supreme Court justice, it has to get approval from the Senate. If the president appoints a cabinet member, must get approval from the Senate, unless the Senate's not in session. And so if the Senate is not in session, then the president can utilize what's known as a recess appointment and put that person in place without a vote from the senators. The question will be, will John Thune insist that the Senate be in session the entire spring, for example? Because Donald Trump has selected an unusual assortment. To be fair, an eclectic group of people to
a rogues gallery. I think is the word you're looking for.
Well, no, I'm going to go with eclectic for the moment. So whether it's Matt Gaetz or Pete Hegseth or Kristi Noem or Bobby Kennedy Jr. to run Health and Human Services, or Linda McMahon, that's right, the wife, the estranged wife of Vince McMahon, to run the Department of Education. It's an unusual group. And so the Senate has already said that they're uncomfortable with a number of these nominees. But if Thune says we're not going to be in session and the Senate majority leader controls the calendar, there won't be a vote.
And this will really show us what we have to expect from the Senate in the next 4 years. I think this more than anything else. Are they going to be a rubber stamped Senate, which is of course what Donald Trump expects? I think the House has already shown that it's has no problems with rubber stamping whatever Donald Trump wants to see. And the Senate in his first 4 years was very, very helpful. They did not put many stumbling stones in his way.
I suspect that when push comes to shove, John Thune will not be an obstacle, and whether that means passing, approving nominees in open session or allowing recess appointments, I don't think that he's going to stand in the way. Let's think.
All right, I'd like to make a prediction here.
Oh,
If they actually do that,
prediction.
if they actually go ahead and have some confirmation hearings, Matt Gaetz will not make it. Matt Gaetz will not make it through as Attorney General.
Which is why I don't think that they'll have confirmation hearings for Matt Gaetz. I think you're right. I don't think that he would be able to pass muster on the Judiciary Committee, and I think that the Senate would vote him. He's not well liked on Capitol Hill.
No, he's not.
But if Donald Trump wants Matt Gaetz to run the Department of Justice, then John Thune will make sure that the Senate is not in session. That would be my, but I hear what you're saying, and I think that that's probably right. An Easter egg. Oh my goodness, the fourth Easter egg. I have seen the future of rock and roll, and his voice is not Leonard Cohen. It's great Canadian singer-songwriter Leonard Cohen. Highly recommend his first album, the 12 songs. It's fantastic, but it's democracy.
Well, the kids will know him because of Hallelujah.
Right. Yes, Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Which was sung by Kate McKinnon following the Donald Trump's victory in 2016. I wonder if we'll see Kate McKinnon again on the Saturday Night Live. So democracy is from Leonard Cohen. The House, real quickly, the House. The House is always an unusual place. You've got 435 members, which means you have so the House, the terms are 2 limits. So you have 435 elections every 2 years. Democrats made some gains, but when push comes to shove, it looks as though Mike Johnson, who is the current House leader of the Republican Party, will still have enough votes to control the House. And again, there are still races that are still being decided. But again, when push comes to shove, I think it's the case that the Republicans will have a slight advantage. I would just mention, if you're inclined to give a thought, you might give a thought to the new representative from Delaware, a trans woman named Sarah McBride, who is already being pilloried by House Republicans. House Republicans are threatening to create a kind of bathroom ban, and Marjorie Taylor Greene has actually threatened violence against Representative McBride if she encounters her in a restroom. And so the House is always an interesting place. So
the madhouse.
The madhouse. So Laura, can we take a couple questions here from the chat?
Okay.
Looks like we have, go ahead.
Yep,
Please.
you're good. Let's see, going back to the Harris campaign, do you think that Harris not putting enough daylight between her and Biden's policies was harmful for her in the long run?
I will quickly answer 100%.
I don't think it should have been.
Oh, well, I know.
But that's neither here nor there. But the Biden-Harris administration was fantastic for Americans. The Biden unpopularity is one of the great mysteries for me. Just one of the areas that just makes me think I don't know anything about politics anymore, because I would have thought that their record was a record that you could actually run on. But clearly it wasn't. It wasn't.
Yeah. So I think we think it was a huge mistake. Another question, please.
Do you think Trump would have the support to amend the Constitution? And what are your thoughts on the idea that Trump will get a third term?
This is, I think, one of the real burning questions. I think amending the Constitution is extremely difficult. You need 3/4 of the states, which means that you're going to need states that are purple. So you'll be able, I mean, it's conceivable, right, that you could convince legislators in places like Kansas or Nebraska to alter the Constitution to open up a possibility for a third term. But I think it's going to be it's a very, very difficult task in
I think they're
states.
definitely going to try it. I have no doubt about it. We're
I
going
think
to
they're.
see we're going
I
to
think
see that proposal. It will come up.
totally agree. Yeah, totally agree. It's going to be a long shot, but they're going to give it a go. Yeah, another question, Laura.
Do these contradiction voters imply maybe a lack of voter literacy? Why vote for Holly and vote to end the ban in Missouri?
Your guess is as good as mine on that. I do think, I wonder, I mean, I do wonder if there's a certain, absence of voter education, of voter literacy. There's, yes, there's
But
such,
then,
but yeah,
just to put the grain of salt out there, Steve Foulke is a member of the East Coast Ivy League
it's true.
liberal elite.
It is true.
And they always say that about Republican voters. So
It is true. Yes, I'm an elitist, and so, but yeah, I think one wonders about that. One wonders about the making those kinds of choices. Yeah, another question, please.
Do you think that the states that voted to enshrine abortion rights in the Constitution, like Missouri, will be safe from largely Republican-led state houses trying to overturn restricted access?
No, I think Republican legislatures will do what they need to do or try to do. I think we've seen it in Kansas. And so, yes, I think that Jefferson City, yes, they'll be working double time to create challenges.
But I think this makes it difficult enough that they won't actually be able to do much. I think it really makes a lot of sense for voters to do this, and it certainly is going to make the job of these legislatures harder
Well, I think that's right.
to limit abortion.
I think that's right. Another question.
How likely will the House actually accomplish anything? The GOP showed us this past term that they don't work well together.
No, there's no chance. All right, there's no chance that the House is going to be able to accomplish anything, that Mike Johnson will not be able to create any kind of coalition. The only way he was able to get a governing coalition was to get the help of Democrats, and Democrats will not assist Johnson. What I think this means, though, is the likelihood of more executive orders, right? So if there was, if there was a kind of green light on Capitol Hill to get bills through, I think you would see more bills. But I think it's going to be such a muddled mess that the executive order will be the coin of the realm. And so, yeah, I think
White House initiatives will probably pass the House quite easily. And I think we'll see some of these things in terms of new tax laws and things like this. Probably rubber stamps. As a rubber stamp House, I think they'll make Trump's agenda easier.
I think that's right. But it's the margin is so slim that even if you have members who are sick or are absent or some reason, because again, you can't vote by proxy in the House, you have to be present on the floor. And when your margin is 5 people, you're just 5 people away from not getting anything done. And so it gets tricky. Can we take one more question, Laura? Then we're going to share the last Easter egg.
All right. How will 22nd century historians view Trump in this political period?
Dave?
Well, again, everything that I thought I know is apparently not true, but everything that I thought I know would say that history is not going to be kind to Donald Trump.
Well, yeah, I would suspect that that's probably right. That would lean in that direction as well. I think history will see Donald Trump as an incredibly consequential figure, a person to really alter the office in a profound way. I really think that history will be very unkind to Joe Biden, very unkind about Joe Biden. I think there were a number of blunders, particularly the way he ran his campaign or didn't run his campaign, and that put Harris in the crosshairs, I think. I think that will be a problem down the road. And so it is at the top of the hour. And so I guaranteed one more Easter egg. And so Ladies and gentlemen, dreams really do come true. It is the Godfather of soul. It's James Brown. The final Easter egg. Funky president. People, it's bad. So there you go. You have the 5 Easter eggs. And so if you can get those to me by 10 o'clock, extra credit, it's yours. All right. And so I'm committed to hanging for a little bit longer. If Dave is, and
Sure.
if Laura, if you don't mind, I don't know, just a couple more minutes, we can take on some more questions.
You bet.
So let's do it.
All right. We've seen character standards lowered for leaders in the US. Do you think that this is due to the decline in civics education? Maybe starting with the Clinton-Lewinsky episode?
Oh, wow, man, that's a good question. Starting with Clinton-Lewinsky, I think it probably, I might go a little further back and think about one Richard Milhouse Nixon. But
see, back then it was still working.
I guess so.
The mass of Americans were appalled. Their expectation is this is something that a president doesn't do, and he had to resign as a result. So I would say back then it was still working. And
well, they were appalled with Clinton as well, and he was impeached, and so I would argue that it was working then too. I think what you're saying, Dave, is that it's not working now.
It seems to me that there's been a real deterioration.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah,
I totally agree. Yeah. Another question, please.
Who could follow Trump as the next Republican presidential candidate?
I don't think it'll be J.D. Vance. No one really comes to mind at the moment. Here's my thought on this. I think that Trump would have to pick a successor, and I think he'll be reluctant to do so because I think he'll have a hard time getting off the stage. And I think that there will be a real bloodbath in the GOP to sort of be the heir to the MAGA throne. I don't think it's J.D. Vance. I don't think it's going to be his children. That's not really answering the question. Dave, you have a thought about maybe who we might see next?
I think Nikki Haley. I think Nikki Haley has set up a kind of a base for herself. Wouldn't surprise me to see her.
Well, speaking of keeping things on the upbeat, I mean that's a remarkably that's a remarkable suggestion that we would go from the GOP would go from Donald Trump to Nikki Haley. But all right. I mean, she's an interesting individual, and she does have a base. I'm not sure.
What I don't think is going to happen is that Donald Trump will be followed by a Republican president. I don't think that's going to happen. But
I'd agree with that. No, I'd agree with that 100%. We're not going to. Yeah, I think that's right. And I got another couple more questions. This is a blast. I appreciate it.
Okay, these are a little bit more of statements, but I think you guys will comment on them. I have heard political commenters talking about bullet voting. People who voted for president and ignored the rest of the ballot.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, here in Wisconsin, I know folks who voted for Tammy Baldwin and left the president choice blank or voted third party on the ballot.
Well, I think this comes back partially to the question of civic education, because I think people who have been well educated in civics don't do that sort of thing.
I think that is true. I think, though, that in the case of bullet voting in 2024, I think there's a real concern that it might be a sign of meddling from abroad. And so this is one of the areas that's getting a little momentum. We saw a lot of bullet voting, as mentioned in Wisconsin. We saw a lot of bullet voting in North Carolina as well. Bullet voting meaning that the presidential race was ticked and no other no other race was ticked. And so I don't know what to think about it at the moment, but I know that it's starting to get some attention. There's going to be people are going to dig into this. I don't know. I'm not quite sure, but Another question.
How worried should we be about Elon Musk's influence, or how quickly will he burn his bridges?
I think the bridge is already on fire. Um, we should be worried. I mean, we should be worried. We have Elon Musk who's in conversation with Iranian leaders. I mean, does Elon Musk have security clearance? I mean, what are we doing here? But I think it's unlikely that his alliance with Trump will last very long.
There's two egos that actually you can't find a room that's big enough to allow them to comfortably fit in it together.
I think that's true, but I mean, people should. I mean, it's a worry. It's worrisome, but I don't think it's going to last very long. Another question.
All right, the last one I have in the chat. What is your opinion on the 2025 project?
Oh,
It's real. It's consequential. It will. I think we will see attempts to get the low-hanging fruit regarding 2025. I think that means, I mean, not to be, crass, but I think this means mass deportation on a scale that we have never seen in the United States. But some of the more grandiose ideas that have fueled this right-wing fantasy, I don't think will come to pass. But it's definitely real, and I think a number of key members of Trump's administration are on board with this. And so the fascinating thing about the denials, I don't know anything about this. Who are these people? I mean, it was all
well, they said the unspoken parts out loud, and I think it says something about where they thought the American electorate was, that they could do that they could afford to do it.
Right.
I think the pushback was much stronger than they anticipated. But to be clear, Project 2025 is a blueprint for fascism in America.
That is 100%. That's well said. I couldn't agree more. And these are going to be very difficult times. I mean, we've been kind of joking around here, but it's gallows humor. It's going to be a very difficult few years in the United States. We won't believe it, I think. And so what a great way to end. So thank you, Laura.
We had one more that came in
Please.
while you were talking.
Okay. All right.
Who will be the next Democrats?
Oh, this is Dave's favorite question.
We have a deep bench. We have a lot of good people. And just a stab in the dark, I'm thinking, look to California. Help me out here. What's his name?
You think it's Gavin Newsom?
I think it could be. Yeah, I think it could be. I don't think they're going to go with a woman next time.
I think that's right. I'm wondering if the Democrats won't float a Pete Buttigieg as a possibility. I think it'll be a risky choice.
He'd be a wonderful president.
He'd be a wonderful president, but I think candidly, I think he'd have some challenges. But I wonder about Buttigieg I think it's possible, and or Newsom. I think those are both interesting possibilities. It's going to be, as Dave said, there's a deep bench, and it's going to be a real free-for-all.
We have a lot of talented women, but they're not going to get a shot next time.
No, I think that's right. I mean, I think this is not going to happen for a while. I think it's clear, right? I think there's a glass ceiling. I mean, I don't know if we said as much tonight, but I think it's clear that there's a glass ceiling in the United States in terms of presidential leadership. And Americans are willing to do lots of things and vote lots of different directions, but they're not willing to vote for a woman as president. Full stop. And we've got a ways to go on that. Laura, thank you again so much for your time tonight. Dave,
thanks a lot. Yeah.
And everybody, thank you. You will see us again, I promise, in April. And so we'll do this again soon. Thank you all, and be safe. Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again, Dave. Bye-bye now.